the reason why we're not advancing fast is not because we don't know what to do. It's just because we are holding to ourselves and to our beliefs and behaviors that keep us just in where we are and don't allow us to kind of be vulnerable in that out of the comfort zone that we all need as also businesses to be. And then the linear model is a very safe model, like it works.
Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is in collaboration with Ashoka Canada, a global network of leading changemakers and social entrepreneurs. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by Lis Suarez-Visbal, who is a social innovator, a systems mover, a doctoral researcher at Utrecht University, and an Ashoka Fellow. She has nearly 2 decades of professional experience as an NGO director in countries as far and wide as Spain, India, Canada, Thailand, Mali, the Netherlands, the US, and Colombia. She holds a bachelor's in finance and international cooperation from the Externado University of Colombia, a graduate degree in special studies from Harvard, and a master's of science in sustainable business and innovation from Utrecht University. With expertise in gender equality and the circular economy, she has devoted the last 3.5 years to finding evidence of social impact in the apparel value chain and how companies and policymakers in the sector can reduce the asymmetry between social and environmental impacts toward a transition of improved working conditions and well-being for all workers and greater circularity practices in this sector. Welcome to the show, Lis.
Thank you so much, Anita. Happy to be with you.
And I was just saying before we hit record, you lived in Montreal, my native city, for many years. We've known each other's work. We've always talked about getting together for a coffee date. And here we are across the ocean, catching up over Zoom. I love the way the world works.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. Well, I'm happy to have you on this show, and I'm happy that Ashoka chose you as one of their fellows to highlight in this series, because I think what you've been doing through your career is astonishing. And I'd like to start with the backstory, if you'll indulge, because I like finding out sort of, not everybody has a straight line path. I find social entrepreneurs have the most circuitous paths, and oftentimes it is marked by inflection points. So I wonder if you could just share a little bit about yourself and maybe some of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So, you did mention that I had studied finance and international development, and I remember my first job was actually with an investment banking firm. And I worked there for 3 years, and it was good enough to realize what I did not want it to do with my life. It gave me a lot of tools, but I felt that there was very little actionable impact that I could have. And I felt that there was just numbers that represent no meaning. And for me, I really needed to feel that some sense of connection and that I could contribute in any particular way. It also made me very aware of the privileges that we hold and that some other people don't have. So no, for me that was kind of like one of the first things to say, okay, well, this is good to know, figure this out now and not later. And I think for me the second important movement was well, I decided to quit my job, and that meant also leaving the States and a comfort and a possibility of living in the United States that for many people is something that you're kind of aspiration to, but I was kind of in a search for myself, as it happens to many people in this process of trying to go deeper on yourself. So I decided to go as an international volunteer to Thailand and to India. And in Thailand, I was working with girls who were previously engaged in child trafficking, and we were working in a center teaching people business training. But I guess for me, very important was also that how close did I feel with people who were very far from me, and we didn't speak the same language. We But for some reason, I was teaching English, me, Colombian, I was teaching English to these girls, and I was going with to class with them to learn how to do Thai massage or and it was a very transformational experience because, as I said, it made me aware of also what we have more in common, and then I have to put myself into my earlier 14-year-old or my 17-year-old, and what would make me dream and hope, and when does that change in your life? And after that, I remember going to India, and that I think was kind of like the closing loop of this, where am I going kind of journey. And it was in India. After I finished my volunteer job in Thailand, I went to India, and I remember we were doing some surveys about community work, and I was looking for a teacher for a small school, and it took us like 5 hours to get into this really remote location, and then we had to walk like for 2 hours. It was just quite a journey, and I was like complaining, I was tired, it was hot, and then I'm looking for this teacher, and nowhere do we find, and all of a sudden from a corner I see this gorgeous woman like involved in this beautiful sari with like 5 blocks of breaking her head. And I asked her, I'm looking for the teacher from the school. She just put the bricks on the floor, and she told me, I am the teacher of the school. And for me, that was kind of like super powerful, because it just, again, it was this sense of, me, I'm complaining here because, I cannot find things, and I find everything a bit complicated, and that this woman is helping to build the school, but it's also the head of the school, and as I said, that for me brought a lot of a sense of the power that it is within, and the different levels of in which we can exercise it, and how can we bring it that forward. And that really, those 3 moments were for me essential for deciding to build the organization that I built in Montreal and that I directed for 13 years, that was about women empowerment and through sustainability. So really taking the power within people, and then seeing what role do we play, and what are we starting with, and how can we take that forward to have a meaningful contribution to the world we live in.
That is so powerful. Those stories are so powerful. I'm so glad that you shared them with me. I can visualize the woman with the 5 blocks, and how much humility must have come in that moment when you realize that she's the woman that you're looking for, who's the director. That's quite transformational. And as I was listening to you, a couple of thoughts came to me. This was not a planned question, but I teach social entrepreneurship, and inevitably there are students in my class that they take the class as an optional class, so it's not mandatory. So they're already interested in the idea of sort of the social change that could happen in the world. But so many of them are in the track of getting a job upon graduation and sort of building up their portfolio. And there's just the pressure, I find, on young people in a way that we didn't have growing up, at least not to the same extent. There's that group. And then there's also, I feel, among my peers, women who are, raising their children, have mortgage payments, have worked very hard to have great careers. And there's a little echo of, I should be doing more with my talent, or there's more to life than just this 9 to 5. I wonder if you could speak to the kind of nudge that you'd like to encourage them to take off the beaten track to explore the work of social impact, not only because the world needs it, but because it actually could be extremely, extremely rewarding to their lives, and can open up doors that they can't even imagine. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but anyways, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think that this is what I did is really something that I like taking the leap for just putting yourself in the most vulnerable position was the most transformational experience in my life. Like I wonder what my life would have been if I had not done that choice of just decided to take a little deep breath. And of course that's also powered by different circumstances, and for me also it came from a natural or by a circumstance that my father died, and when when your parents die, when you're far away from your country, gives you a lot of sense of that time is passing, and then you're thinking, so what am I doing? That was really a big trigger of like, is this it? And so that for me was kind of like, I need to make sure I find really what I want to do. And I also think that for me, what was the most amazing thing is that I went with no expectations, like I really went with humility. I said, like, I need something that is very different from me. And I need to, in those corners, find me. And because I went with no expectations, the experience was amazing. Like I still, for today, I have very close friends I made with some of those girls and one of some of the community workers that we were there, and that image of the woman from India is like engraved in my mind. I can see her. I could, if I was a good painter, I could be able to paint it. But it is that, and then in any moment in which I feel that, yeah, because as you know, we go through a lot of ups and downs in the social innovation work also. They stay very close to me, like in those memories of like, don't forget, why is it that we chose a different path.
Oh, all right. So you've done a lot of different things, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about your research, but I'd love to know how your life's work at a meta level ensures or tries to ensure equality and inclusion, because that is the theme of the Ashoka series that we're doing, is on equality and inclusion. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, well, it didn't come, I think, by luck. The fact that, it was not originally chosen, but when I reflect after it, what was the link of the different experiences that I have volunteering internationally is that I was working with women. I was working with women who were, and they were one way or the other, related to the textile industry. So the textile industry is definitely an industry in which you find a lot of women in the sector. But you find a lot of asymmetries and power dynamics, and when we talk about the feminization, it's not only that there's a lot of women, but that women are the most vulnerable workers, or are the ones that are holding the most vulnerable positions. And I was always wondering, but like, how come is that be possible? I meet all of these very strong women in their community, and they also work very close to their own networks, but yet, in the big scheme of things, their voice is lost, and there is a lack of, yeah, ways for them to communicate. And for me, that I mean, we cannot have sustainable development if we don't have the equality. If we cannot, for me, having the equal access to opportunities, and recognizing the differences in which we're starting, will not take us further if we don't take that from the position to start. Like, and I see also a lot of and that touches a little bit my research work still today, that asymmetry still in the way in which we see sustainable development as a, like, sideways, as only the environmental side, and we just take for granted the human beings. And so, I think the path that I've been doing through FEM and through my research work is the same, but it's just from a different perspective. But the motivation was really this need for inclusion, and this need not only for inclusion because it has to, but because we're losing an incredible opportunity by not having those voices helping us steer the wheel to where we need to go.
So could you share just briefly what FEM, what the mission of the organization is, and what some of the programming is, so we just get a glimpse in some of the work on a practical level?
Yeah, well, the organization doesn't work anymore, but for the time that it worked, FEM International, it's standard for an acronym, a French acronym, Femmes Entrepreneurs du Monde. So we really believe that entrepreneurship was an action, a way to make a contribution actionable, and it was not on an end on itself, but like that entrepreneurship allow people to discover themselves, because it pushes you to be out of your comfort zone, and then to discover, so you become a better self being. Of course, you want the business to succeed, but sometimes things and conditions are not there, and most of these businesses do not end up flourishing, but the entrepreneur will always gain, even if it lost, if, and so at the end, that was for us very powerful. It's like, if this person is in a better position, is in a better job, it has a better sense of self, then we have moved towards, social impact, and improving that. So we took entrepreneurship as a way, and sustainable development with a inclusion focus was kind of the goal, to make sure that we can build the bridges. And I guess textiles was really the sector in which we were working. And then we tried to connect these two worlds by the different programs that we did locally and abroad related to textiles and entrepreneurship.
Right. And so you've moved now from, being the director of this NGO to becoming an academic researcher. I'd be curious to really understand why you've gone this route, and if the shift has helped you achieve some of your personal and professional aspirations as a change maker.
Yeah. And, you've worked with so many different social entrepreneurs, and you also evolve, like with the projects and with the experience, where I guess the majority of us, when we started this you start with a lot of passion, but maybe you're lacking some sort of a background to keep you moving, and you learn by doing, and sometimes that's a hard way to learn, and sometimes but I also realized that the sector is extremely complex, it's global, and it has a lot of, as I said before, asymmetries. And that although I believe a lot into the empowerment element of the individual, I really thought that if we wanted to bring that a bit more lasting, it needed to be from a systemic point of view, and we needed also to trigger not only the entrepreneurs themselves, but also the policy decision-making process behind it, and also the institutions that also kind of perpetuate or not, and education is one of those institutions that can either help channel new innovation, or can perpetuate also ways of working. So I felt that that I needed to look at things from a different perspective, really, remove the jacket of the entrepreneur. And also because at some point, a small organization is always subject to its own survival, and at some point it's hard to keep the two things different. And I realized I was, in ours to also keep the organization going and have the financial resources, you make choices that does not always lead you to the right place to go, and then you are far from where you started or where you wanted to be. And then I also said, that again was another moment of my life where I say, okay, where am I going now? Where is this happening? And I was also, it was a tough decision, because FEM was for me like a baby, it started in my kitchen with a whole bunch of other volunteers, and 13 years passed, and we would work internationally and across Canada, and it was an amazing experience. But it was also time for me to say, let's move on, and I think in that level I learned a lot individually as well, on a personal level of to realize when enough is enough, and to be able to either overcome your own sentiments, if you want, that some, or a sense of attachment, to say, does this still make sense? Are we making the difference that we want to by doing this, or is there any other way again? And so being in academia was at the beginning was a bit of a shock, because of course you as an entrepreneur, so you're ready to go and going left and right, and here it's a very structured system, and people were a bit confused of my approach. It was like, well, but this girl that is a woman is in this department and this other department, we're here divided into departments, sustainable development, And there's in the 8th floor is more energy and resources, which is circular economy, and the 7th floor is more like social innovation. So I always say to my colleagues that I work in the 7.5 because it was really like in that intersection, and also bringing the gender department abroad, really to be part of this. It has been an incredible journey as well, for learning experience for me also to kind of adapt to a different system. But likewise, I think it has been it's also so much that it can be done in academia. The resources are amazing, in terms of not necessarily financial resources, which are of course present there, but it's just you have so much more at your disposal, but you get lost. And what is important in academia, I think, is making that connection and also making the bridge with the stakeholders out of the world, which for me that was the whole point, like I want to make sure that like we can bring another perspective from the academia, and that we can also influence policymakers, but with the intention to really improve the working and living conditions of women working in the sector, for sure.
Well, okay, so as a follow-up question, tomorrow I'm going to attend an Ashoka meeting to discuss how the university sector can help scale social impact and work in collaboration or as a stakeholder with social entrepreneurs. So what do you believe the university, the higher education can do to help, really accelerate the energy and enthusiasm of social entrepreneurship and social innovators?
Well, I feel for once, like I don't see any other way but that universities work with stakeholders from the outside world, because universities hold the power of knowledge, and that knowledge is nothing if you cannot really make it actionable, or it's a waste of knowledge if it just goes into like paywalls that nobody can access, and also all of these resources put into place for making, like you work in research because you hope to change something, but if you don't get access to to the change makers out there that actually have the tools and the ambition to change something, then so I think it is two sides of the coin for sustainable and successful social innovation processes. You need the back end knowledge and the capacity to reflect back that institutions like academic institutions and university give you, and the space for exploring, like that understanding that. And then you also need to work with stakeholders and businesses to drive that in. So I believe that it is very important that there is just like a complete synergy, and that their businesses are not reproducing on their own the same mistakes that we have already studied, that they don't work, and that it is more more transdisciplinary research where I think we should be going, like we said, like we are all interested in doing this better. We as academic institutions can provide this kind of space and support, and then the entrepreneurs bring that the space and the problems that need to be focused, so I believe that the best approach is an approach in which you can combine both ways forward, and that like academic institutions are supporting that process of social innovation, that it is really about making lasting change in society, and help us to achieve into a place in which we can live both better with the environment and with people.
So it sounds like we need a lot of half floors. We need those buildings.
Yes, we need a lot of 7.5 floor for sure.
So you've talked, okay, so I understand the gender lens of your work for sure, but I spent a whole semester looking at the circular economy a few years ago and thought it was amazing, but I want to hear more, because I'm sure there's been even more work in the last few years that I'm unaware of, and maybe some people who are watching or listening are unfamiliar. Can you unpack what it means to work in the circular economy, and how you're working on, you were talking about the asymmetry, how circularity can help maybe democratize things and make things fairer. Sell me on the circular economy.
Yeah, well, to start with, I joined thinking that it was like this is really this paradigm shift, and what circularity. So in a nutshell is to be mindful about the resources and the ways that you create. So minimize the use of virgin resources and minimize the output of waste by making your products and materials last longer in the economy. And how you can make that they last longer in the economy by providing jobs that allow people to make products last longer, by repairing them, by remanufacturing, by rethinking how they are being produced, and think how it is going to be at the end of the life, and what other lives can it has, So for me, the biggest element in circularity is really the system approach, because when we have looked at, and what I mean by that is that circular economy on itself is not a goal, it's a mean. It's a mean to sustainable development. So it is, and it's a mean that allow us to combine, from a holistic perspective, how the system is connected, and I think that and it is not that circular economy is bringing anything new, I think the world has worked also with these principles before. The natural world does that for sure. But I think that in businesses, what is new is that to understand and breaking that pattern that normally in production is on silos, right? You only concern about this, you're only concerned about that, and you're only concerned about different stages of the value chain. Well, with circularity, you need to think to put your eyes not in front of you, but really to the vision of where you want to go, and think of who is behind, who is at the end of this value chain, and who's behind you, because to be able to work good, it needs to work on a systemic level. So I think that that it has a good potential to transform our societies, because it forces us to look at the connections and not at the end result only, So the processes are important, and how we get from one point to the other, and what impact it brings into the process from A to B is critical, and it's critical not only for the environment but for people as well. What it lacks at this moment, that has been the majority of my work, is the narrative behind circularity is still too asymmetrical. So it is still too focused in the material side, and we kind of forget. And that for me was I entered in this world in a moment in which I think, okay, it is in the process of getting established. So we're in a good moment to influence the narrative. Because once it is decided that this is the way to go, then if we don't do anything about it, we're going to be just reproducing the same problems that we have with the linear system today. And that was a big, my first paper was exactly about that. So like, if we don't really are intentional in the narratives that we put in circularity, we just have embedded this a system of production that it is only about producing more with the cheap cost, and not considering what human impact this has. So this journey of these 4 years of my doctoral research has been focusing first bringing evidence of what we are reproducing if we don't do something about it, and then the second part was about positive desirable futures, and can we imagine a different future other than just projections, right? It's that I was not interested in saying what can we do a little bit better now. I was just wanting to see when we free ourselves from all the constraints of how we work today, where do we see ourselves, and can we construct a society based on that ideal perspective, and then just backcast. And that's what I love about academia, is that, like, if you talk to a business owner, they will say like, oh, that's impossible, there's no money, there's just but you have that, it is a mental process of putting yourself in that possibility. And this was an incredible journey, because we worked with several companies, 90 companies at the end, in India, Spain, and the Netherlands. And we embarked with them in this journey of like creating this what we call transformative circular futures. And these are visions of textile industry 2050, that was both circular and inclusive. And how does that look like? And then what we did after that is that we backcasted to today, and we co-created recommendations for policymakers and for industries, of saying, what do we need to do? If that's the place where we want to go, if this is the society we dream for in the, or the sector, because it really was very intentional to the sector, and then start like piloting with companies, like little elements of what could be done, and uncovering that there's a lot of assumptions and misconceptions of internally in business, and that like starts from there, to start really thinking also outside the box and really think about the 30 years from now, which is an exercise that nobody is used to, and that requires a lot of skill building, like the capacity of not only thinking the next 3 years is too short, so how can we put ourselves into the kind of problems that we have are complex and are not going to be solved from one day to the other. So we need also to have like this like long-term vision that allow us to encapsulate the little changes that we're doing on a daily basis.
So,
in
I
our
mean,
businesses.
this is going to be an excellent segue question to the inner development goals, but let me just ask one in between question, because you talked about how circularity has so far really looked at material or natural resources and not so much the human element. And now you're talking about the work that you've done, which is envisioning 2050. What could that look like? What are some of the answers to that question? What does some of that vision look like that changes the asymmetry and really lifts the human in that whole space? What inspired you from your work when you looked forward 30 years?
Well, what's very well, because one of the activities that we did with people is a letter from the future. So they had to write a letter, like if they were in 2050, to themselves or to someone who was living in 2020. And I analyzed those 80 letters. And it was very interesting. It was super inspiring to see what are the ideas behind, like people were, and also because this is not about one future, it's not a one common vision. The vision is that there's multiplicity of ways and geographical location and moving them forward, that there's different ways to arrive to Rome, let's put it that way. But at the end was perhaps the recommendations per se are not transformative per se, because you have heard it before, but what is transformative is that it's coming from the sector. So meaning, like when you say, okay, so no, we're really going to have to work on the triple bottom line has to be really lifted. That we really need to ensure that it is not only, you're not only reporting about financials, but you are also reporting about the social impact that is, so far it is more like voluntary work that has been done, but like really moving forward, what does that mean? And what, like when we talk about like living wage in the sector, like across the whole value chain. Yeah, well, like this is not something new, right? We've been talking about this now, but the fact that you can see it from the perspective of companies saying, okay, so how can we? There's a lot of resistance for a lot of the things that we know that needs to happen today, and I think that these kinds of exercises allow people to say, well, how can you? And the resistance is sometimes based also in, as I said, like misconceptions or wrong assumptions of that it cannot be done. And we need to start like drilling in those places where the resistance is. And I feel that this, and again, connecting the academia with the stakeholders is amazing, because it allows that to break those ceilings that we think that we cannot go through, and that like is, I think that the reason why we're not advancing fast is not because we don't know what to do. It's just because we are holding to ourselves and to our beliefs and behaviors that keep us just in where we are, and don't allow us to kind of be vulnerable in that out of the comfort zone that we all need as also businesses to be. And then the linear model is a very safe model, like it works. So people are afraid of just jumping off that and say, okay, so what does it require for me to do this? But experimentation with universities offers an incredibly rich space for enlarging your comfort zone and enlarging that space for, okay, we tried this, the circularity now means this, and then inclusive circularity means this and that, so I find that the process per se more empowering that the actual result itself, and that's what I found, like from the ideas, as I said, on themselves, it was the transformation is not on the recommendation, it's on the process that happens with it.
And the process seems to me, okay, so now I'm going to walk through the segue. I've become increasingly interested in the inner development goals, right? So it's a framework of 23 skills across 5 different categories of skills. Things that come up for me when you're talking about your work, optimism seems to be one of those big things where you can envision a better future. Obviously, long-term thinking is another one. I bet you see yourself in the framework as a whole. I wonder if you could speak to, since you've probably taken a peek, I don't know if you knew of the IDGs before, how you feel the inner development goals could be useful in the change-making work that you have done and want to continue doing.
Yeah, well, I thought it was actually super interesting to read them, because there's a lot, and that's also part of what my work has been about, understanding, the sector from a system perspective, and that we in organizational change management, we talk about soft aspect and also hard aspects, and the soft aspects are all related to human beings, and we know by researchers that, like as I said, like the problem is not it's not really so much the infrastructure problems. The problem is that resistance that is in people, and it starts by an individual, and you can see that from an individual on a leadership position, but you can also see it on the middle manager. Part of what we did in the research, it was like we pilot these recommendations from the future, if you want, with 10 businesses, and for 6 months they try to implement this, and then we assess at the beginning where they started from the social and the environmental part, and 8 months later we reassess again what changed, basically, and it was incredible to see that there is a lot into empowering not only on the human resource side for sure, but in the individual that you end up connecting with, so it is and I think it has to go deeper than just thinking about management. It really has to think about human resources, or the human side, beside the policy element, but what me as an individual are motivated to. And one of the I should have included this in the powerful moments of of my life, but I remember not that long ago when I went to India and we were doing the interviews with workers, because to assess the social impact, we created a framework called the Social Impact Assessment for Circularity, and that talks about quality of job and gender equality and inclusion and workers' well-being. And when we were there, one worker started crying, and this was all in Hindi. I was not, this was the translator, and then I asked him, what's happening? And he was overwhelmed because nobody had ever asked him what he thought. And for me, it was also, that was super powerful, like that. So I think that that human side and working at the very basic level is essential if we want to move forward. So I like that the framework is put in a way that is with different levels of workers, if you're looking at it from the perspective of a business, can be related to, because it's really based on the human aspect, and so I find it very powerful to be able to look in that perspective. Of course, I'm very curious also of how do you operationalize it, or like I read it and I'm looking at it as a practitioner or like an academic from the framework that like how would a business will use this. So I find it very interesting, and also like on the practice would be nice to see how workers relate to it, and what brings because as I said, I find it very extremely powerful to have the voices really of different kind of workers at all different levels, and for businesses too. It was super insightful to get that perspective, because it never happens, that's just you just work on assumptions, and when you also most of the times you interview people, it's only managers, you never go deeper into like the different layers of what it makes the organization
flourish. Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk offline about what I'm working on now, a book about the inner development goals. I'm very excited about them and want to make them practical and operational. But I call them the 23 invitations, right? Because I think you might find, I think I came to the IDGs through my work on empathy and compassion, which is one of the skills to develop. But I think other people might have different ways of entering the conversation, and we want more people in that space. Anyways, that's sort of how I'm framing it. Let me ask you a question about Ashoka. So you're a fellow. How has your work changed, or how has it been since you've been selected? What's the impact been for you as a social innovator?
Well, for me, it has been pivotal, the support of Ashoka for enlarging the work that we did with FEM, and the impact was amazing. And the funny thing is that today I'm working with 3 Ashoka fellows in my so I'm working with Ashoka fellow in India and Ashoka fellow in Spain, and with Ashoka here in the Netherlands. So it is really truly a lifetime network. So we connect, and for me that is the most critical aspect, is that, yeah, how you really connect at that level with people. I remember, like, Anita, for instance, the woman that I'm working in India with, we were working for a long, I think like 10 years before we actually met in person in 2017, which was quite amazing. But and it is really through that work of Ashoka, of really providing you both things, is the network, that is a global network of support of very likely minded people, and committed and enthusiastic, and the secondary layer of contacts that you come there, because it's not only the entrepreneurs, the social entrepreneurs themselves, but also the support system, the funders, the companies that we guide us on the process when we were developing our impact strategy was fantastic. But also that system thinking level, and I think that that's really what inspire, or what differentiates, I think, that Ashoka from many other organizations, is that really focus on that of social impact, to really look at from the systemic level. And it's funny, like, as I said, I'm right now analyzing, if I were to do FEM again, I will have better tools to do it that when I did it then, because of what we have developed now through these research projects, which is amazing, because I think that I can't wait to see how what we have created help other social innovators out there to take it to the next level.
One last question, Liz, and it's been so lovely to spend this hour with you. It's a podcast about empathy, and I always ask my guests at the end if they could share a story from their life when they were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for them. So I wonder if something comes to mind when you were the recipient of someone else's empathy.
Well, the story that I shared at the beginning about the woman was a lot about that, like it made me realize that the woman, the teacher in India, was what a different life. I mean, she gave me with saying no words other than saying I am the teacher. Like it was so humble, so authentic, and so yeah, it is so direct that it made me feel very aware of as I said, like some sort of a point of privilege, and make me be very open to, yeah, this new way of doing, or this just to look at things in a different perspective. For me, it was a bit of an aha moment of also because she was super caring. There was nothing on her that was holding grudges to me, or like what was just like she was very receiving, and I would have expected something completely different, and because I was tired and it was a long day, and but all of these things seem to just go through her, like life is just too much or too beautiful to kind of worried about this, and as I said, like for me, the day of today, and it's been almost 20 years that this happened, still very present, that sense of care and abundance on yourself. That for me was a way of showing there is more, that I learned from that, and it touched me in that way, and I go back to that memory when I need to feel that sense of comfort too.
Yeah, and I think, as I'm listening to you, the visual of her having 5 blocks on her head and taking them off in an act of empathy because she recognized that you were disoriented or lost or confused. It is really a powerful metaphor that everyone has the capacity for empathy.
For sure. And yeah.
And that tears are welling up. I see that.
Yeah, no, because it was a very, very powerful moment. And yeah, so like it was so serene, so peaceful. There was nothing on her that was rushing, it was like a collide of two different worlds, like me rushing, trying to get things done with the best intentions, right? But she being super serene, super calm, with a very hardship work, and still being so complete, and so herself. And so, yeah, as I said, like for me, it was like, wow, this woman is amazing.
Beautiful. I love that. Lis, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon in Utrecht with me.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Anita. It has also been a pleasure for me to be again and meeting each other online. Let me know whenever you come to this side of the world. We'll be happy to connect as well, and to see where you are and where am I.
We'll do that. So thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy. I want to extend a special thanks to Ashoka Canada for their support. Ashoka Canada is dedicated to fostering social innovation and supporting Canada's highest impact social entrepreneurs. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you'll hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy.